So, hi everyone, welcome back to our webinar series. I'm Emma Maslen, I'm the CEO of inspir'em. Today is the final webinar in our series talking about pipeline generation planning. Although, as it's 2 days from end of quarter, it feels like it's the wrong time of the quarter to be talking about pipeline. However, pipelining starts again next week because it's hero to zero overnight on Monday night. So, we'll be getting back into pipelining, no doubt, next week. So last one in the series, I'm delighted today to be joined by the team at Clarify B2B, which I'll do some introductions in a second. But before we get started, just a couple of little reminders for me. All of our series is available on playback. This one will be available on Tuesday, so feel free to go in and listen to any of the content that we've provided. And also the pipeline generation planning series is now complete. The course is now complete online, so go in and help yourself to that. There's also a quiz now available if you want to test yourself and your knowledge on pipeline. Just a little word about what's happening over the next coming weeks. So we're going to break for Easter, but our Champion Series is kicking off on the 25th of April. So it'll be Friday the 25th, 3 p.m. UK time to pick up the US time zone. We'll be running a series through to the summer on champion identification, champion planning, building your champions, testing your champions, and most importantly, getting from champion to economic buyer. So if you're interested in more information on that, Lucy will be posting some information in the chat or reach out to us and we'll be happy to share that information. But you can look in the community, and if you look in the meetups, webinars, you'll be able to see it there. So delighted today to be joined by the team again from Clarify B2B. These guys are the experts in outreach. So I thought it'd be great today to hear a little bit about the people who do outreach every single day about what their top tips are. So I'm going to invite Dan first to do an introduction to himself, and then I'm going to hand over to Matt to do an introduction and tell us a little bit about Clarify and also some of their top tips. So go for it, Dan.
Great. Thanks very much, Emma. And yeah, thanks all for jumping on. Real pleasure to be able to speak to you all today. So as Emma mentioned, myself and Matt, we're from an organization called Clarify. Clarify has been working with the B2B technology space for the last 20 years and really focused on helping organizations with their go-to-market to build kind of really sustainable, predictable pipeline, but equally pipeline that ultimately converts to revenue. So we're a bit different as an organization to many outreach organizations in that we have both a sales and marketing function that sit under one roof. So I myself, Dan, I'm the head of planning at Clarify. I sit more so within the marketing side of the organization. So I've spent the last decade working in kind of B2B marketing. I'm really excited to share some of my insights and a bit of a marketing lens around high impact communication. I'll pass over to Matt, who can sort of introduce himself and let you know what he does.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Matt Bartlett-Bond. I'm a sales development manager at Clarify. So I'm at the coalface every day, making cold calls, cold email outreach, connecting with people on LinkedIn, and work very closely with Dan and his team so that we have a real sort of complete message that we can bring to customers, both in terms of marketing and in terms of sales. So what we can do today is speak about something called high impact communication. I'm just going to share my screen with a few slides.
Perfect.
There we go. So I just there we go, brilliant. So getting your high impact communication is really the key to unlocking customers. And we have organizations come to us that want us to be their spearhead, to go into organizations, to open them up, generate pipeline, and obviously generate closed revenue in the long term. And what we find that is you get high impact communication going with customers. When you get that right, they understand you, but they understand you because you understand them. It's communication. It's not one-way traffic. It's not just us throwing messages at them. We're listening to them. We're altering our approach as we do that, depending on the company, depending on the persona, depending on the industry. But if you get that communication going and you get that relationship going, then you can engage more. You can find that relationship develops, continue the high impact communication. We see it very much as not just that first message in with an organization. high impact communication is the long-term conversations you're having with an organization right the way through the sales process. And if you're engaging more with someone, if you're getting that trust going, then you may not be speaking to the decision maker on day one. You may not be speaking to the high influencer, but those people can help you navigate the organization and take you where you need to go. And quite clearly, if someone within the organization is introducing you to somebody else in the organization, it's much better to be sponsored in than to go into somebody cold. And then all through that process, you're building positive associations with yourself and the people, the stakeholders that you're talking to. What that then does, once they got confidence in you, that reflects very well on your brand. So your brand and the association with the brand increases positive feeling towards the brand. And then ultimately, you're then describing a solution and their positive feelings about you, about the company you're working for or the company you're representing, then filters onto the solution as well.
So I guess in the least surprising turn of events ever, the head of planning really likes to make a plan before we get going with our high impact communication. But fundamentally, we see sort of three foundational principles as kind of really getting you off on the right foot to deliver high impact communication. So the first thing we believe is that you really need to know what you want to achieve and how you're going to gauge success. If you're looking to be impactful and you don't understand what outcome you want to drive, then you're never going to understand if you are truly delivering high impact communication. So it's really important that you understand where the prospect is in the buying process, in the buying journey, in their customer journey, and fundamentally tailor your outreach or your communication around what you want to achieve with that individual piece of communication. You're not going to land the sale in the first piece of outreach. So understand what you're looking to achieve from that and ultimately create that bedrock for success moving forward. Secondly, you want to understand and vocalize why you're different and why that matters. Ultimately, if you boil that down to kind of the lowest common denominator, we can call that the USP. But it's not just about the solution. It's not just about the single differentiating factor. How do you turn up differently to other organizations, to other salespeople? How are you going to stand out from kind of the market and really give them a view of not just why you're different, but why that matters for them? How are you going to translate that into a benefit, into something that makes you really compelling and kind of easy to buy from? And then the third aspect is developing a strategy for creating an emotional connection. What we really want to do is drive people away from that rational decision making into that more emotion-led decision making, take us away from a persuading strategy more to an influencing strategy. Ultimately, if every decision was made based on a rational understanding, the best solution would be the only solution. We know people don't buy that way. People are willing to buy based on emotion, based on a connection to an individual, to an organization. So understanding how you're going to create that emotional connection is really central to being able to deliver high impact communication. But we feel if you get those three things right, it's going to set you up well to sort of move forward.
Dan, can I just chip in and just ask a question against that? So we talk about this all the time around, so if you're trying to reach out to a customer, so just to the first point there is it's worth understanding that, like you said, you're not necessarily going to get the hit in the first communication that you have. So just really important that you're thinking about, how many times you're going to have to reach out. What's the value that you're reaching out with? What's your strategy around that? Is it going to be a few touches before you eventually try to get something back from the customer? So just from a planning perspective, it'd just be worth just understanding. So is that when you're thinking about the planning there, is that you're thinking about assets that you're reaching out with, it's the value that you're reaching out with. So, and then thinking about how do you get them to the point where they're getting to a meeting? What's the sort of process that you're thinking about there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from my perspective, I really buy into it's quite a simple framework, but I think it adds a lot of value, the serious decisions buyer journey. So we can call it whatever we want, sort of awareness, consideration, decision, but within that you have various different component parts or comms objectives. So in that awareness stage, loosen the status quo, commit to change. That's really about understanding that really we need to present a different version of the truth to this prospect to kick them off on their journey. So it's not about necessarily talking about solution value. It's about presenting this new world view to them in order to get them to overcome that inertia and want to start to move. Then at that consideration stage, that's when we're talking solutions. So now you need to start to hit on those comms goals of exploring possible solutions, committing to a solution. So there we want to deliver that kind of product value to really give them something tangible to say, with your new worldview, this is how you can look to overcome some of those challenges or reap those benefits. And then at that bottom stage, that bottom of the funnel, it's about justifying the decision, making the selection. So what can we be putting in front of them that really passes that kind of sanity check at the end of the process? What are those kind of speeds and feeds, those case studies that they ultimately need to feel like they've made the right decision? So I think from a planning perspective, it's understanding where are they in that process? What assets are you leaning on at each of that stage, to your point, Emma? So thought leadership towards the top, something that presents trend analysis or challenges that ultimately they want to come. In that middle of the funnel, how are you creating a really compelling piece of content that is solution-led? And at the bottom of the funnel, how are you utilizing something that potentially is more stat-led, is more kind of basic functionality-led to really drive them through that process?
No, that's great. And then for those of you that are using MedPick that are on the line today, so very similar, going back to the sorts of things that we've talked about over the last few weeks, which is do your research, think about customer pain, think about what's interesting them, what's gonna get the customer interested in terms of what they want to solve, then thinking about differentiators, decision criteria, and then also then thinking about credibility setting with things like metrics as well. No, that's great. Excellent. Yeah, do you want to click on to the next one?
Perfect. So we've just wanted to present to you a few things that we believe kind of really define high impact communication. So first and foremost, I think it's communications that are clear in their objective and obvious in their delivery. There is no need to hide behind the fact that ultimately we are trying to sell something. It can be quite easy to shy away from that, but people are aware of that. Be kind of objective, be obvious in what you want to achieve, but always make sure that you're positioning it in a way that kind of really adds value to that potential prospect. Secondly, we want to create that emotional connection. So I've mentioned it there previously, but it is all about going beyond the functional, finding a way to make it real to the prospect, make it interesting to them, engaging to them, give them a real reason to want to explore the solution in more detail. We want communications that demonstrate relevance and drive memorability. So Emma, exactly to your point, doing your research, understanding, okay, how can I make this relevant to the current situation that the customer is in? How do I lean on the kind of information that I've gleaned in order to make it feel really relevant? That's ultimately going to make you far more memorable further down the line. This person really understood my challenges and presented them in an interesting way. We want comms that are personalized and create that platform for two-way conversation. So it isn't just a pitch. The last thing anyone wants is just a direct, this is exactly what the solution is. Are you sure you don't want to buy at the end of it? We want to be personalized. We want to generate that relationship and really foster that two-way communication. That's how we're going to learn more. That's how we're going to position better further down the line. And finally, just remember that the communications are the tip of your spear for the rest of your message. It's not about getting every single point that you want to communicate in that one piece of communication. Understand, okay, this might be the hook to get them on the line. Then what do I want to present further down the line? How do I want to work my way through the organization? It's not just a single buyer in a lot of these organizations. So how do you understand how to multi-thread, how to make it more appealing to more different people across the organization and really deliver the context that you want to when and where it matters the most?
Just to chip in again there, just so if anybody's got any questions, then please feel free to just put them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll get to those shortly. We'll leave some time for Q&A. So just on that then, Dan. So absolutely, it's the tip of the spear. So I mean, I don't want to sort of boil it down to like really small tips, but so when you're reaching out to a customer, do you guys recommend that it's like a certain length, like the initial sort of reach out? How long is too long and how short is too short? Is there a sweet spot that Clarify found?
That might be a good one for Matt because he's doing this on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of respects, it depends. It depends on the persona that you're trying to contact. Invariably, though, you want that initial message to be short enough to be digested without going over the top. At the same time, sometimes providing a narrative, where, especially when you've done work with other organizations in their particular sector, we can be a bit more you could extend your communication a bit more, make emails a little bit longer. If you've got a good story to tell, if you can get that engagement in the first couple of lines so that they're thinking, oh, what's this story about? Then great. And likewise on the phone, um, you know, phoning up somebody, and I'm just going to go through what's low impact in a second, but phoning up somebody and then going into a 20 or 30-second spiel about why you're calling, you're not going to get anywhere. I think what we would say is that if we can get that two-way communication going as soon as possible, that's really important.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely worth, and just back to your point there around who are you talking to? That's really important. I remember when I was managing director of Concur, um, we always used to have a joke about my team would send me really long emails where I would then be supposedly digesting those and sending those on to a CFO of a company. And I would often take an email that was probably 15, 20 lines long, and I'd turn it into 3 lines and send it to a CFO and basically say, let's have a meeting. And it was amazing just how different as you get nearer the top, how much more succinct you really need to be, because they're literally just going to read the first 2 lines and then that's it. They want to understand why you're emailing them.
And
Great.
also remember that they may not respond on that first communication. So if
Mm.
you've used up all your powder on that first communication, you don't have a second chance as much. So not only are you putting it off by that first email or whatever, you're actually stopping yourself from having a better chance on the second and third go with that organization. Let me just
Yeah.
go on to what is low impact. A few things on here. So communications that are quirky for the sake of it. It's great to be memorable. It's great to be different, but you don't want to lose the message by just going completely left field with that first approach. At the moment, I'm working on behalf of SAP, so generating pipeline for those guys. If I turned up outside BP's office dressed as a chicken saying I want to speak to the CFO about our ERP platform, I'll probably get escorted off the premises and SAP told not to darken their door for a good number of years. So it needs to be memorable but not overly quirky, otherwise you lose the message. Comms that are like War and Peace, essentially that's just what we were talking about, particularly around technical and the speeds and feeds side of things, the features and the functions. Those first, particularly when you're speaking to the financial side of the business or the non-technical side of the business, talk about how it's going to benefit their business. You're trying to connect at an emotional level. The whole technology analysis can happen at a later stage when it's needed, but certainly not upfront. Don't be over assumptive. You may have spoken to a whole host of CFOs in a particular industry sector, but don't assume that the person that you're speaking to next is going to have the same problems as everybody else. And again, this comes back to having two-way communication. Ask those open questions. Don't assume that they've got a particular problem, because actually you might miss a whole load of opportunity if you're just going with one particular item. Over automation, big danger at the moment with AI, people thinking that using AI as a shortcut, but not doing it very well. So it just comes through as being depersonalized, as spammy, and it won't get read. And then I appreciate, everyone's got quarterly targets to hit. And as you get into the end of that quarter, you think, oh, if I just send a few more emails to this person, I can get them on the hook. What ends up happening is that they probably just get tired of you sending out probably the same message all the time, and either block your call or put you into the spam folder. So yeah, don't oversend as well. And again, this is essentially the same sort of track. Make sure that you're aligned with what your prospect's looking at. This comes down to research. Make them feel that you respect them as a person, respect them as a business. You've done your homework. You've got a really good feel of what might be on their mind. You're not going to come across everything in your research. That's why you're calling them and you're having an open communication. But making sure that you're aligned with the prospect is really important. And then comms that are boring. Think about when you've got that first 10 seconds on the call with a customer. If you're doing cold calling, from my perspective, from sales, am I just going to blurt out a load of stuff that is just they're going to switch off straight away? And like with email, particularly if it's lengthy, it just becomes a blur and doesn't get read if you can't engage on those first couple of lines on an email. We've condensed it all down into what we call the 3 C's of high impact communication. Firstly, it's being current. Again, to what I was saying about doing your research. It may be that when you get through to a prospect or a target prospect, they're not in a position to move forward at this time. So you have to tweak your approach. Current may mean they want to have a speak, they're happy to speak about their plans for next year or how things are working out at the moment. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have a current opportunity, but it's being relevant to them in from a time perspective. And it needs to be contextual. It needs to be of interest to them. Um, you know, if you're phoning up a chief people officer, for example, and I think my dog has just knocked over a jug downstairs, but we'll worry about that later. So yeah, it's making sure you have the right context and that you're speaking to the right person about the right solution. Again, I'll asking open questions, but going in with the right message. And then it needs to be compelling. What you're looking for is for them to take action. It may not be placing an order today. That'd be fantastic, but it's much more likely that you're getting them to get on board with your messaging, introduce you to somebody else maybe, or organize a demonstration, organize an introductory call with the wider team.
So just on that, I would definitely go back to a story that I remember from when I was at BMC, where we had the CIO of EDF. He popped in to talk to the sales team, which I'd definitely recommend anybody to do. If you're prospecting into particular personas, invite those personas in and talk to them about what catches their eye. We did recently do this on the persona series, if you want to listen back to the CXO series that we did. But I always remember the CIO said, I take meetings where people talk my language, where they've done the research, they talk my words, and then if they look like they've made the effort, then that's when I take those meetings. So really important that you've done your research. Um, I just want to go back though, Matt, to something that you mentioned earlier about the not just spamming people with with more outreach. Again, another question that we have quite often is when is too much communication too much? So, what sort of intervals do you go between, reaching out to people? Because you're trying to test your message. So you think you're researched, you reach out, you think you're current, you think you've got context, you think you're compelling, and then you get deathly silence. How long do you wait before you start reaching out? Like, how do you guys think about that?
Well, from a sales development perspective, um, it really depends on the sort of the prospect that your client the product you're selling. Is it quite niche? Is it quite specialized for you mentioned Concur earlier. If I was going to Concur, it's quite a small number of people that I'm trying to get through to, whereas what I actually sell is SAP ERP, so it's much more sort of high level. I would say that the important thing is to do it in bursts. So you might say, right, okay, for this month, I'm going to be going after this particular client, or over the next 3 weeks. Let's see what happened. Am I getting a response over that time? Am I able to analyze open rates on emails, for example? Am I getting any pickups at all from outreach? You will get some organizations that no matter who you call, they just don't pick up. There will come a stage when it's like, right, okay, I'm going to put them to the side for now. Let's move on to the next one, because obviously, you can't keep flogging a dead horse if it's not if it's not going to wake up. So you move on. So I would say, if you have a 3 or 4 week cadence, which is maybe between 10, 15 sort of steps in that process. So you're mixing up calling with emailing, connecting on LinkedIn, and then sort of getting that sort of feedback. If you're getting nothing, then you can park them. If you get sort of little nibbles here and there, maybe keep them in a bit longer, but then put them aside and come back 6 months later, because they could be completely in the wrong point in their cycle. It could be that they're sort of coming to year end, for example. Maybe at this point in time, you're not getting through to anyone because everyone is head down trying to close out a year or close out the quarter. So just be mindful of your time in that respect. But yeah, you can park and then come back to them at a later stage.
Yeah, and I think that's a great tip. I think thinking about it in bursts, in cadences, and cycling through the cadence. We talk to people about that all the time. Focus on your accounts, then cycle through your accounts. Okay, great.
Yeah, I think a good rule of thumb on it as well is you're probably oversending if you're bombarding someone in what could well be a holiday period. You're not going to get an out of office from everyone, but if you send someone a message and just because it's been 7 days and you've got no reply, if they come back to three or four messages, three or four pieces of communication, all of a sudden you've gone from keen and slightly pushy salesperson to, oh my gosh, why is this person flooding my inbox while I've been away? They don't get they're not sitting on your side of the fence. They're not there knowing that you're chasing the target. They're existing in their own world. So I think it's about just kind of really putting yourself in the prospect's shoes, being mindful of where they are in their journey and really understanding what potentially they're kind of experiencing on that side.
Yeah, and I'm conscious we're fast running out of time, which is always the way that happens on these webinars. But I think it's just really important to talk about just on the um, just understand what's going on in your customer's world. So it amazes me how many people are doing outreach in different countries, in different cultures, and are completely oblivious to those holidays. So particularly over the Christmas period in the UK, it's pretty much a shutdown unless you're in some sort of retail or in end of year. I had a situation this year where somebody sent me 4 emails over the Christmas period. And guess what? I didn't read any of them until I came back and saw all 4 in there. I mean, just frankly ridiculous. But yeah, so be very clear about, who you're targeting, what's going on in their world, what's likely to be happening. Okay, I'm conscious we've got about 3 minutes left. So did you want to go on to your next slide or did you want to take some Q&A?
We can take some Q&A.
Yeah, we'll take some Q&A if there is any.
Okay. Melissa loved the Christmas comment. Absolutely ridiculous, wasn't it, Melissa? Just stupid that anybody would do that. Yeah, so I've actually got a couple of questions. If anybody else has got some questions, please do feel free to put them in the chat. Matt, I just wanted to ask you, because you're doing this every day, what do you think about calling? Because
I think it's if anything, it's becoming more important. It really is a point of differentiation. What I'm seeing is that I think organizations are struggling with understanding that calling and speaking to someone face to face, you can firstly, you can accelerate the process much more quickly talking to someone, and you're getting that immediate feedback. But yeah, I think it's absolutely vital. And as we go into an age where AI may be taking over, it may not, having that human element and having that human voice is going to become more important.
yeah, I think we see that a lot with a lot of the teams that we work with, that the people who are calling, yeah, okay, they're probably not whacking out the numbers as much as some of the others, but in terms of conversion, they're getting significantly higher conversion. So, but again, there's research that's required for that to be able to get the numbers, know when you're calling, work out a good time to call, all of those sorts of things. So making sure you're mixing it up is also a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Callum has asked a question, which is, how do you balance the research time versus the calling outreach? Don't get into analysis paralysis. Yeah, so any thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I always say, you can quite easily get into a situation where you spend half an hour or an hour profiling a client, getting names and numbers of all these different people in the organization, and then you phone them up, and the first person you speak to says, "No, we're not interested because we implemented it last year." So you've wasted all that time. So there is a balance there. I think you can do it in a bit more stepped approach. So definitely look at the website, definitely look at the news section, put the company name in it, and click on news and see what's in there. Have a quick look at the annual report. Things like ChatGPT are now really useful for importing an annual report saying, give me the summary of what's in here. Is there any relevance to what I'm going to be speaking to them about? And, that can speed up a bit of time. But yeah, there is a balance. And I suppose it depends on what you're proposing, who you're trying to get through to, the proposition that you have. But I would say, if you're spending, it's difficult because some propositions you have to research a whole organization. That's going to take longer. So those sort of like those, maybe a CFO, a CIO, IT director, get 3 or 4 names and then give them a call. If you can't get me through, you can always then go back and then add more to the pot. But you might find your information out on those first couple of calls. So don't spend huge amounts of time researching for a particular prospect, but don't do nothing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just on that, I'm conscious that we're fast out of time, but just on that particular point, I think people have to remember as well that this is a dating process. And also, you're not going to reach out to just one person. So you need to do some research. You need to reach out to some people. You're trying to work out who's the best persona. That will then require more research. So you have to test the research that you've done. Okay, unfortunately, we're fast out of time. That was amazing. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. And thanks very much to Dan and Matt for your great insights. If anybody does have any further questions for the team, then please do come back to us and let us know. We'll see you all again next time when we do the Champion Series, which is going to be on the 25th of April. Happy holidays, and we'll see you all in a few weeks.
Great. Thanks for having us
Thanks,
on.
Emma.
Great. Thanks, James.